Okay, good morning, everyone. Our speaker today is the founder of the nonprofit Collaborative Community Housing Initiative, CCHI for short, Laurie Williams. Laurie and her husband, Rick, have one adult son, Zachary, who inspired them to form CCHI. Laurie is leading this grassroots movement to create inclusive living options with a group of volunteer families and stakeholders. By collaborating with educators, organizations, housing specialists, and urban planners, CCHI is encouraging public dialogue regarding inclusion, as well as creating space for community problem solving regarding affordable housing for people with IDD. By researching and visiting various living models around the world, they have learned that creating neighborhoods where everyone can thrive is possible. Laurie is committed to building a more equal, diverse, inclusive, and welcoming community for people of all abilities. In addition to working full-time as a corporate recruiter, Laurie is also involved in the National Fragile X Association as an event organizer, speaker, and mentor. So please help us welcome Laurie Williams.
Thanks, Linda. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is such an amazing turnout Friday afternoon. Thank you so much. It's so lovely. Before I get into the slideshow, as Linda mentioned, I have a 28-year-old who is still living with us. So, you know, that question always comes up. We haven't gotten him out the door yet for a multitude of reasons, but this presentation is very much about CCHI's journey in our housing and kind of what the concepts are. I will tell you a little story to start with that's somewhat amusing. I don't know about your kids, but my kid is very literal. He has Fragile X. He's extremely literal. So when we've been talking about housing all these years, he's like, I want to stay at home. Why would I leave? I'm in this great house. I have a cook and, you know, it's wonderful for me. And we're like, you can live in an apartment just like your typical friends do, right? We don't say that, but just like your friends. And he's like, no, I'm good. I'm good here. So we realized in this process, he had no idea what it looked like to live in an apartment like his friends, because he doesn't go visit them because they live all different places, you know, and all of his friends from high school moved out and they live all over the country. So we figured out he has no idea what he wants and he doesn't want because he hasn't seen these options. So we took him to a group home where some of his friends live here in the Chicago area, so he could really see what that looks like. And then we took him to New York, where two of his best friends live, and spent the weekend there so he could hang out in their apartments and see what that felt like with friends. And once we did that, he was like, okay, I want to have my own apartment with my friends. So the story is we could do all of this work and we always think we know what our kids want, but they only know, you know, they know what they know. So I encourage everybody to do that with their family members if they haven't yet. For the sake of this conversation, we typically call our children because they're always going to be our children, or we call them young adults or whatever. So I'm going to refer to them as our young adults in this, and that will refer to any age group that we're dealing with. So CCHI is a 501c3. It is primarily a volunteer organization, and it is made up of parents with children with IDD, also other disabilities. Our focus has been IDD, but we have a full range of disabilities in our community. And in addition to that, we have many community stakeholders that have been involved in the building of CCHI. And universally, we are all committed to building diversity and inclusion in our community. So we were founded in 2018. We became a legal 501c3 in 2019 with 28 families. And we started with a group that went from south as Evanston up to Lake Bluff. We're over to Schaumburg now. We have some people in Gurnee. We have people in Buffalo Grove, Deerfield, Northbrook, really quite a wide scope at this point. And I encourage anyone, if you have any questions, put them in the chat and then I can do them in the end, but put them in the chat right away so you don't forget, because there's a lot of information that we're going to go through. So Our mission, which we've actually changed at this point from 2019, is it's to create inclusive communities where individuals of all abilities live collectively, each determining their own path to a meaningful life. That's kind of what our vision is. And we really feel like everyone should be able to determine what they want and where they want to live and how they want to live. And our mission is, I don't know why this isn't moving, sorry. Can you see the vision? Yes, Linda, can you see the vision? Okay. So we were created because as parents of young adults with disabilities, we are desperate to find solutions. As a community, we know we need to create new models to promote diversity, and then everyone has a chance to live inclusively. Unfortunately, in our state, people are not doing this for us. So as parents, just like your organization started, that's why we started, is because out of necessity. Our overall mission is we facilitate housing and community engagement to include people with disabilities. So we are focused on housing, but we're equally focused on community engagement, because we can't really have inclusion in our communities without that engagement. So to give some perspective on where we are at compared to the United States, I'm sure you've all seen these numbers before. The US is at a higher percentage of some of these very basic things compared to Illinois. People living in a 1 through 6 person settings, and 6 states between 89 and 94% live in a 3 or few people settings. And that's 77% US, 42% for Illinois. Spent on 6 or fewer people settings, 81% versus 58% for Illinois. And state institutions, there are 14 states in our country that have 0 institutions. Illinois still has 7. So not only are we battling our own families and our own stories, we also are battling this institutionalized state where that is the default for our population, unfortunately. So thankfully, we've gone down on the amount of adults seeking services. It's still over 5,500 people of adults in our state that are seeking services. There are currently 14,806 people on PUNS, as opposed to what was 20,000 a few years ago. So the one thing that Allison Stark really worked hard on when she was the director was really bumping up the amount of people that can be accepted on the PUNS list. I'm sure you guys talk about this all the time, but please make sure you are on it if you're not, because it's super important. As far as our state is concerned, so funding disability services, we are 44th. Funding residential placements in community settings of 6 or less is 49th. Individuals with disabilities aged 18 and older living with family caregivers is 71%. So 71% of our young adults are still living with their families and caregivers, which is an incredibly high number. And we have 27% and climbing every year of caregivers who are over the age of 60. So I gave you a link here. You guys can go back and always refer to it. The numbers keep changing, and those changes are updated regularly. But what this picture tells us is we have parents, grandparents, caretakers who are aging, and they are not able to provide the amount of support, housing, anything for these young adults with disabilities. And that is all in addition to all of the other people who are already adults in the system, which our state is already very challenged to accommodate. So everyone, I'm expecting everyone to get up and run and leave your desk right now and move out of Illinois, because that's what some of our families have done. Our current reality here in the US, only 25% of individuals with disabilities receive formal services, which again, I'm sure you guys have gone through all these things because you're so focused on vocation and finding employment. But that is really a travesty if we think about the increases in our population of individuals with disabilities, and the percentage just keeps going, you know, down as far as who is being served. So we have quite a bit to go as far as how we can provide services for our population at this point. And if we're in Northern Illinois, if we are in, you know, these areas that are not way downstate, I would say, or south side of Chicago comparatively, we're in much better shape, but we're not in good shape. So to give you a little history, we went through a housing training program with Center for Independent Futures called New Futures Initiative. And we started that in 2018. There were 5 families that all were interested in making solutions for housing in our area. And for any of you who have done the program, it's a wonderful program. If you haven't done it, what it is, it's kind of a weekend training. We spaced it out over 1.5 years because that's what was easier for our group. But we went through the training with a service provider agency to come up with new housing solutions together. And the CIF program, it does a really good job of telling people everything kind of that's being done all over the country and giving people models that they can look at and evaluate and get in touch with. What we found at the end of the training was that we had all this education, but we didn't have anyone to help us actually do anything with it. There was this, okay, well, who's going to help us actually do all this stuff that we've learned, and we've made decisions and we've figured out kind of what we want, but now what? We you know, we're parents. What are we going to do? We don't know what to do. So we actually hired someone from CIF to consult with us for 6 months to kind of help us create a foundation for our organization. And they helped us create our 501c3. They helped us with our org plan, with all the kind of technical things in starting our nonprofit, which was very helpful. And that is kind of part of what I think our organization is trying to do. And that is, how can we help families get from A to B? Because it is really important to create these communities, and it's important to understand how to do it and what is out there and what is the best fit. But, you know, 9 times out of 10, parents of children with disabilities, young adults with disabilities, the bandwidth is limited. And I know that because I'm one of them. And to say, we're going to come up with a program and hand it over to parents and say, good luck with this, it's overwhelming. I mean, our day-to-day life is overwhelming. So to be able to do that, it's just too much. So we really want to be able to be at a place where we can just help groups of parents come up with that solution and help them through it, help navigate it, because that's what we have learned in this process. So we spent 5 years collecting data. We invited a lot of families to join us. We just did a mass email to everyone we knew in our, you know, and we had a lot of families come to the table. We visited many different housing projects in other states. We talked to different housing scenarios all over the world. I mean, we did co-living, we did inclusive living, we did senior living, we did every kind of scenario out there to learn best practices and what might be possible. We worked with many stakeholders to create our organization and to meet the needs of our community. We have collaborated constantly with other like-minded organizations. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We would like to help facilitate the process for families in getting information that they need and in discovering the holes in our system, because through this process we've seen we have a good amount of programming sometimes, but we don't have transportation, or we have social things, but we don't have enough vocation, or, there's just all these little pockets, and each community has their own challenges. We certainly don't have all the answers. The playing field continues to change. Literally every time I do this presentation, one of my board members is like, you have to update the facts again, because it just keeps changing. So we just have to keep pivoting. So as an organization, what our goals were and are is to address the expanding need of inclusive, diverse housing options for individuals with IDD and additional disabilities in our home community. We are advocating for funding to help communities create more housing solutions. We are giving the power to our young adults with disabilities to live where they want and with who they want. The challenge, as I'm sure many of you know, if there is a bed that comes up that is available in our state, you are contacted if you are on the list and you are told there is a bed that's available in this group home. There's your chance for a community living arrangement. And it could be 6 hours away from where you live. It could be with people that your child has never met before. You have no idea whether they're going to get along. All of our kids have quirks. We all have quirks. And this system is set up now that there's just no thought or energy or money put into such an important decision for all of us. So we really feel it's super important that that is first and foremost. Where does this person want to live? Who do they want to live with? They have as many rights as everybody else, and they need to be treated as such. A goal: create several inclusive models that can be replicated with the guidance of our organization or on their own. Build relationships in our communities to increase partnerships and collaborations with housing, programming, and employment, and to provide help of families in need of guidance for housing solutions. So these are our primary goals. So the different types of models that we are talking about, there's a lot of conversation about inclusive environments, and I just want to be clear what where we started off as, and that is the majority of our children were in an education system that promoted inclusion, and going through school, going through high school, maybe going through transition even, they were encouraged to be fully included whenever possible. So for anyone to come out of a transition program and everyone says there's the cliff, you fall off, it's not only that, it's that our kids were raised in an inclusive environment for the most part. And to say after that, you have to either live in an institution or in a group home with other people with disabilities is non-inclusion. Having a group home in the middle of a neighborhood that is a typical neighborhood is considered inclusion for many people. And it's not up to us to decide what is inclusion and what isn't, except for institutionalization. So our organization felt if our kids were in class and doing all these programs with typical peers, why can't they live next door to a typical peer in an apartment building or in a condo? That's the environment they've been used to. So why would we then say, go back to the special ed classroom, which is kind of what it, feels like as an adult. Now, many young adults need that environment. It's a secure environment for them. And they're living with individuals that they really like. And if they're in the middle of an environment where they still have access to typical people and typical lives, that is inclusion. Our first model is an inclusive model, which means typical people are living next door to individuals with disabilities. So when I'm talking about the inclusive environment for our first building, It is that. It is a mix. It is typical people and people with special needs living under one roof in an apartment or condo. We also have several families that want supportive housing. They are fine with their young adults being in an apartment building or a condo or a house, whatever that looks like, with other individuals with disabilities in their home community. So in their mind, that is an inclusive environment for them. So these are the different scenarios that we are encouraging in our communities so that people can stay in their community. So that means that the inclusive neurotypical individuals are living in apartments, condos next to individuals with IDD. We know that our population, for the most part, all make under 30% average median income. So for affordable housing in a lot of our communities, affordable housing actually falls in 60% AMI, 80% AMI, which is average median income. So that means an affordable housing environment on the North Shore, someone's making about $85,000 a year. So that's affordable housing. Our people can't afford that. They're not going to make that much money. So for the people who are employed, they might be able to get away with a 40% AMI, meaning they have employment. They can afford that. But for people who are on Social Security and they do not have jobs, they have to fall under 30% average median income, which means they need vouchers or they need a special program in order to fund the building that they will be living in. All of our models, we need to collaborate with service providers. We do not feel one service provider for all individuals is the answer. Again, that's strictly up to everybody to decide for themselves. But for us, each service provider kind of specializes in different things and supports different things. So we feel that it's very important for the individuals to be able to choose who's going to be supporting them and the families. And the thought process is if you have many families who are making these solutions together, you can leverage that amount of people with service providers. If you say now, I want a service provider to support my son or daughter in my house so that they don't have to move or leave, service providers typically are saying it's not worth our time. We're going to lose money. We can't work like that. We need 4 individuals or 5 individuals. And so let's say you're in an apartment building or in a condo, one person could or agency could serve multiple families based on needs. And it's up to the families to decide what's going to work for them or not. If it is a supportive housing environment, there will be an overseeing service provider that is chosen by CCHI and the developer. But beyond that, there can be another layer where individuals are actually choosing their own on top of that. Again, we want self-driven choices on whether they want an apartment, roommates, activities, everything like that. We would like to have a program director on premise to encourage inclusive programs for the entire community. So this is not an environment where there is a staff person taking everyone out for pizza one night or going to a basketball game one night or to the movies. The concept is true inclusion. So perhaps there is a yoga studio and this program manager actually facilitates yoga classes for the entire community, not just individuals with disabilities. So again, it's encouraging full inclusion in the community and it's building a more diverse community for everybody. It's not just to the advantage of our kids, it's to the advantage of the greater community. So, and a lot of building relationships with neighbors, because those are the people who are going to be overall natural supports at some point in someone's life. At some point, we all hope that our young adult is going to be walking through a community or a neighborhood if they're able to, and somebody knows who they are and may know if they need help or may know if they look lost. If it's a business owner, if it's a next door neighbor, that's what we all want for our kids, whether they have disabilities or not. So that's the kind of community we want to nurture and we want to develop. So We know going into this, as a population of families with young adults with disabilities, we know we need innovative housing and living options. We know we need that. It needs to be sustainable. The biggest concern, of course, is, well, what happens once I die? What happens when I'm no longer around? Are they going to be in the same place that they are now? And that is a huge fear for everybody. So, this whole step of housing, we all look at it as a huge lifetime commitment. However, know that you might have moved several times in your young adult life, and that may be the case for your child as well. We have several people in our community who have lived in 2 apartments already. And at the end of the day, everyone wants to make sure that something is going to be sustainable and that there's going to be options. We want it to be inclusive. And again, that's for our organization. We want to respect always individual choice. We want options for living with or close to family and friends. We need options for multiple supports for independent living, and that moves into technology assistance. We have from the very beginning invested heavily in technology assistance, and we have collaborated with universities that have programs that actually create software and programs for a multitude of things. They have robots that they are having robots learn how to do things for assistance. And it is amazing what they're doing. So we're all thinking support is a person, but as the technology is growing and we are working with different organizations that can tailor things to our needs, we can then have a little bit more support for individuals that would flourish with that from the technology. I will tell you the flip side. Years ago, when Alexa came out, Echo came out, we bought 5 of them and put them all over our house. And we thought that would be the best natural support for our son. And we set up these prompts so that, for example, if he goes in the shower and he says, play the shower, then it will kind of every minute prompt him to do something to remind him instead of just standing there under the water being sensory overload, which that's what my son does. So we had the whole program saying, okay, Zach, it's time to wash your hair now. And great job. Okay, Zach, it's time to wash your body. Great job, all through it. And within 1 week, our son had disconnected all of the things in our house, every single one of them. And then we put it back in, and then he went and he changed them all. So what you thought was the bathroom was really the kitchen, and what you thought was his room was actually ours. So technology is amazing, and we did not give him the credit deserved in knowing that he could shut it down as quickly as we could build it up. So these are so many good learning things for all of us to go through. We know we need options for connection to the greater community. We need community support. We need employment opportunities, and we need flexible options for CILAs, which are community integrated living arrangements, and home-based funding. It's been so regimented. There's so many rules. We have been working with the state for a very long time in how can we expand this? How can we make it make sense? For them, they're saying you can't have a CILA that's attached to a building with programs, which, I understand why they would do that, but don't understand why they would do that, because we don't have options to be that, I don't know, frivolous with some of these rules. So we've been working with them in how do we try to modify these so that they make sense and that they don't prevent us from making solutions. So right now, what we're looking at is rental and ownership models, condos and co-ops, combined population, seniors with people with disabilities, mixed family housing developments, mixed living options with social enterprise. And we have been targeting for this first group, Highland Park, Northbrook, Wilmette, Glencoe, and Glenview. specifically. And Highwood is our primary spot right now because we have land and that's where our first building is. But these are the additional locations that we have families in that we have been looking at developing further. And we're looking at land. So this is our first building model, which is for in Highwood on Green Bay Road. And this proposed building was estimated to break ground last year. I will just say that, and I will tell you the story behind that. It's proposed 44 units, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. The building is about 60,000 square feet. There is options there for a social or business enterprise in the building. There are spaces for programs, community get-togethers. As you can see, there are green spaces. There's a fitness space, a professional kitchen. It's all universal design, and it's a beautiful rendering. And we are still waiting. We are still waiting because we have a few snafus, which I will get into when we talk about our timeline. But this is, and will continue to be, our first building in Highwood. So everyone says, how are you paying for it? And that's a really good question, which is part of the snafus. When we started off, we partnered with a nonprofit developer called Full Circle Communities. We interviewed 8 different developers over a period of 2 years. We met with each of them at least 3 times, and we decided on Full Circle because they were closest in line with what our philosophies were. We had a very interesting journey as to how we got this where it was, and I will kind of walk you through that with the timeline. I will tell you that the funding stack really is reflective of what the model is. So this is our funding stack for our model that we initially developed. It is editing over time, and I don't even have a final answer to it. So right now, the total development, $19.5 million, which is very expensive. And I will tell you, if you're doing an affordable housing, supportive housing, it's always more expensive. It's just the way it is. The Illinois Housing Development Authority, IDA, would give us $5.5 million in tax credits and gap funding. We'd have 13 million in equity, 2 million in debt, 1 million in other grants. And actually we've gotten about 2 million in other grants now. A TIF extension, which covered the cost of the land and some of the operations of the building. And the support services are paid for by the waiver, supportive housing structure, or private pay, depending on the family and what they have. So everyone asks about the support needed and how somebody could possibly live in an inclusive building on their own. And the idea is not that they're on their own. The idea is that they're living independent of their parents or their caretakers in an environment where they are getting the supports they need. So as I mentioned, we want to see an overseeing service provider. We want individual families and young adults with disabilities to be able to choose who they want working with them. And we want to get as much assistive technology as we can to support the individuals who need it. We do have a few people living on their own now, and they have technology in their apartments, and the parents actually get flagged if somebody comes to the door, so they can see who's at the door. They can see or listen in if their kid seems to be having a really hard time. And we think, well, that doesn't sound very different than what I'm doing now, but it is, because it's getting somebody used to becoming more independent without being there directly. So, and you know, interestingly enough, one of our individuals who's in a market rate building with set-asides for affordable came in one night, and there was somebody in the elevator that he felt was suspect, and he made him very nervous. And apparently that person went to the building manager and said, there's somebody very suspect. So they were both thinking each other was suspect. And the police ended up going to his door. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if the police went to the door with my son answering it, I have no idea how he would react, and it's like, that's a really good training. That's a great opportunity for us to think, oh yeah, that we got to think about all the things that can go wrong or that can happen so that we have a plan of action. And thankfully the parents could be there on video and the parents could help facilitate the conversation if needed and help, their son deal with the situation. And it ended up being a misunderstanding. They both thought each other were kind of bizarre, whatever, and everything ended up fine. But that was a pretty extreme scenario where the parents were able to navigate it through technology, which I thought was pretty cool. And we're not suggesting technology takes the place of all supports, but it can be a supplement to it. Additionally, for support, we want to have a program manager who does have those ongoing social opportunities for the entire community. We want that person to have relationships with the outside peer organization, to facilitate engagement, facilitate things for everybody to be involved in, and also to keep relationships going by doing group meals, celebrations, anything like that. And then the full-time property manager will be provided by the landlord. And that is what the overall support feels like at this point. So one of the things that we knew early on is we wanted to build relationships in our community. And in order to do that, we had a lot of programs early on, and these are some of the examples of them. And, within a half a year of us becoming a 501c3, we go into lockdown with COVID. So we had all these grand plans of years of programs that we ended up saying, okay, we can't do that anymore because. So we actually pivoted really incredibly well. Our programming committee is outstanding, and they really made things that everyone could get involved in, and that was really beneficial to the outside community. The top two pictures here, the top one was a food drive where our organization brought groceries and paper goods and house goods to a pickup for families in need. And so these are some of our families that participated in that. And then the second picture, we have a few programs that work with the Lake County Food Bank, where we volunteer to help and distribute food and goods every Friday. So we have had programs where we've hired outside facilitators to help support our young adults in that. And we've also had where we all meet there one day and we all help wearing our CCHI shirts, which is a lot of fun. It's really great. So it's a very important part of our mission, and that is, how do we serve the community? We don't want to go after our communities saying, you owe us this. We want to go after our communities and say, look at how we can all live together. Look at how we can serve the community, and look at our people as citizens and not as problems. And the more we do that, the more relationships we have, and the more our young adults shine, because they're wonderful, giving, loving people for the most part. And they're a joy to be with in these environments. I mean, they have so much fun together. We all have fun together. So it's really great. And then the bottom two pictures, we have programs that obviously for families to get together, bowling, bocce, movie, pizza, all those things. So those are all really important. Additionally, we do speaker series, and the speaker series is very much like this, where we are opening up to the greater community, all of our members. And it's right now we're doing Meet the Candidates. So every single week, CCHI is sponsoring a Zoom with anyone running for city council in Highland Park and in Highwood. And we are speaking to all of them for 1 hour and telling them about our organization if they don't know, asking them about challenges that have been in the community and where they stand on services for people with disabilities, affordable housing for people with disabilities, and try to build relationships there so that they're very invested in our population. And that has been incredibly important. We also sponsored a financial wellness series, which is 10 different pods of things that parents participated in and our young adults participated in, which were great. And then every year we have meetings with service providers and kind of bring them up to date on what we're doing and ask them questions about what we want out of the service providing and who is open to it and who is not. So how do you do all this? How do you build all this? How do you get people engaged in this? We took part of our model from a model that is on the East Coast called Main Street Connect. I'm not sure if any of you know of it, but it's in Rockville, Maryland, and they were probably 3 years ahead of us, I want to say, in their development. They are open now. They are operating now. They are running a affordable mixed rate, typical people living next to special needs people with a social enterprise on the first floor. And how did they start? They started with membership, and they said who would be interested in supporting that. And they had a very robust feedback from their community of over 700 people supporting them. So we thought that would be a great thing for us to do. So we launched membership, and really what it was is are you in favor of what we're doing, and do you support what we're doing? If you do, it's all of $35 a year up to, I think, $125 a year. And that is putting people kind of on the ledger saying, yes, we support this. Not only that, it gives people the opportunity to be invited to all the things that we do, everything that we do, regardless of where they live, and also give them exposure to other families, other housing things, our developers, all the work we've done. It brings them into the fold and gives them the opportunity to kind of learn from us and meet other parents that are going through the same thing they are. So that ended up being great, and it's still great. And like currently right now, we have 3 different programs for our members, which are really beneficial to the young adults and to the parents and to the greater community, which is wonderful. I'm going to go forward so that I can do the timeline, because this speaks pretty much volumes for a lot of this stuff. So here we go. This is a very confusing timeline, but I'm going to give you the story. Buckle in, people. So we started early on, and as I mentioned, we went through the training. As I mentioned, we hired a consultant. In 2019, we established a website and social media and the board of directors and all the organizational documents, which is a lot. It is a lot. We, on our first year, received a $50,000 grant from Lake County. We really put it in as a fluke. We're like, we want to come up with a new model. You're looking for new ideas. We filled out a grant app and we got it. And it ends up, from that point, Lake County has been incredibly supportive of our organization and has continued to increase the funding that they will provide for us in creating housing. And we meet with them regularly. And they asked me to speak at one of their board meetings a few weeks ago because they want to raise awareness in the community about housing for people with disabilities specifically. So it's been really an amazing experience being able to collaborate with them and get their support. We became a legal 501c3, and we received a lot of support from government officials. Our mission in the very beginning is we are going to build relationships with as many people as we can. We met with our state reps, our senators, our congressmen. Haven't met with the governor yet, but we will. And the governor has his hands full right now with all the institutions, as you know. So he has to deal with those in a big way. But it is really great because we've had letters of support, and we actually had actual support by them. So all of these things are kind of part of the journey. I want to specifically talk to you about the TIF extension and about the project that we started in Highwood. So as I mentioned, it's super important to build relationships with politicians. It's super important to go in and what are our shared goals together? I think we've all learned as parents with disabilities, we fight every single day for our kids. We advocate every single day. Most relationships with school districts are really combative. They oftentimes are confrontational. That is the position we are in as parents, like our whole kid's life. So we are so conditioned to do that. However, if we want people to work with us long-term and support us, our philosophy is you go in and you build relationships. You don't go in and say, this is what you're doing wrong, or why don't you know why don't you know all the struggles we have? We go in and just continue to build and build. So we did that with the city of Highwood. We did that with the city of Highland Park, and we did that with our reps, senators, whatnot. So through that process, the city of Highwood said, we would love to work with you on this. We think this is a great idea. We think that we are a very diverse community, but we never considered people with disabilities when we're talking about diversity and inclusion. They only think culturally, they're not thinking disability. So that was an aha moment for us. So we got them on our side and they said to us, we want a TIF extension. If we get a TIF extension in our community, we will give you land to do your building. And maybe we'll throw in a few extra bucks on top of it. So we need this TIF extension. Otherwise, yeah, you can buy land, you can do your building, but we're willing to donate it to you, but we need a TIF extension. So they did all the work to get the TIF extension on the community level. We went to Bob Morgan and Julie Morrison and said, Highwood's going to support us if you support them. So we want them to have a TIF extension so that we can get this project off the ground. And Bob Morgan and Julie Morrison said, fine, we will do it. And they did it. They got a TIF extension for Highwood, which was a lot of money. And then Highwood then said to us, okay, we will donate these 2 pieces of property to you. We will demo what's on it, yada, yada. So that all goes well and good. We apply for the first round of funding for that beautiful building you saw before, and the Illinois Housing turned it down. They said, not high enough. It didn't score high enough. Every single round of applications, every single year has a different point system. They change it every year, and you have no notice whatsoever when you're learning what it is. So it's our state really is kind of crazy when it comes to these things. So our developer said, don't worry about it. This happens all the time. First round, they always turn it down. They don't know you, blah, blah, blah. So spend a year building relationships, spend a year doing a new application. The city of Highwood started pushing back about affordable housing. They started saying, maybe you want to do market rate with affordable. Maybe you want to, blah, blah, blah. So we said, okay, we could do this new application with a few market rate apartments, but the majority are going to be affordable. And we got support from Lake County. We got support from Julie Morrison, Bob Morgan, blah, blah, blah. Day we're putting the application in, the city of Highwood said, we want market rate. We don't want affordable. So if you can go ahead and do market rate, we're still going to support it and donate the land. And we said, doesn't work like that. There is no funding model for that. There's zero funding models for that. And they said, that's what we want. That's what we want. So we had to part ways with our developer because he's a nonprofit developer and he can't do a market rate building. And we spent the past year re-meeting with new developers who are market rate developers who are interested in investing in this type of project, which is very difficult because it's a long time for them to get paid. And we went back to the county and back to the state, and everyone is still saying, we really support you. We really support you. We just keep going. And so we keep going. We still have the land. We have a new for-profit developer that is partnering with a nonprofit developer. So the for-profit will do all the market rate apartments. And then our nonprofit developer will work on the funding for subsidizing the units for individuals with disabilities. And the funding is completely different. That capital stack that I showed you before, it's completely different because now the funding is all coming from different places. And we have applied for grant after grant after grant. Today, we're putting in 2 at the end of the day that are asking for $8 million in order to subsidize this building. So it's not over till it's over. We're not giving up. We still have the property. We have, at this point, a huge amount of community support. We are in the process of looking at 2 other pieces of property in Highland Park to do a second building and a third building, one of which will be a supportive housing building, meaning 100% individuals with disabilities, because that is what a group of our families want to do. And that's where we're at right now. So it really has been a ridiculous journey, but it has been a good learning experience for all of us. A lot. Okay, so that was then. This is now. So what I can tell you is on a positive note, I have to throw positive notes in. Lake County is holding on to money for us. They're holding on to, I want to say, almost $1.7 million that they have come to the carpet to hold on to it for when we break ground, which is amazing because that's a huge commitment. The city of Highwood supposedly still says they are donating the land and also has said that they would throw in some extra money. So that's still good. We just have to see if we get that bracket of funds, which come to about $6 million to subsidize the affordable units, because there is no funding model for this. We are creating a brand new thing for our state and for our community in doing this project. So a lot of bumps in the road. Some of the good news, though, is our county is very supportive of us as well, and our city is. So Highland Park has a great community foundation. They have supported a program for CCHI for the past 3-4 years. That's called Navigating Independence. And Navigating Independence for CCHI is every year we do something different that is going to help families and individuals build skills that will allow them to become more independent and at whatever level they can. So the first year we had our young adults do videos teaching their peers how to do something. So someone taught how to do laundry. Someone taught how to make a grilled cheese. Someone taught how to call a friend and ask to make plans. Someone taught how to put something on the calendar on their phone, all very basic things. And we found the peer-to-peer teaching was so valuable. There are a lot of videos online and a lot of ways that people can plug in, how do I do this? There was something about your friend teaching you how to do something that was magical for us. So we, every single year, have had a new category for independence. And this year it's nutrition. And it's not just eating healthy. It's actually, how do people access foods that they need, that they're used to, that they want? So we got a grant to help provide those families. Any of our members, this is a great thing for our members. Any member can sign up for this. We have a nutritionist that's also a special ed teacher. She is taking individuals to the grocery store to teach how to grocery shop items they like, how to kind of read labels to understand what that looks like. Our next version will be, how can you spend SNAP, what you can buy, what you can't buy. The other part of this program is we're providing people with the ability to try out different meal plans. So if someone, let's say, is going to be on their own 2 nights a week and they don't know how to cook, we're providing them with like HelloFresh to see if that works for them, or Blue Apron, or any of those. There's a new oven that's out that's called Tovo, I want to say, that we bought one of those, and that's something that literally it's a barcode. You put the barcode, you put the thing in this mini oven, and it cooks it. And it is an amazing concept for individuals with disabilities. So this grant is allowing our families to try that and to see if it actually works for them, so that they don't have to invest in a new program or a new something, and they are learning maybe new things that they didn't know before. They're getting exposed to different foods, perhaps. And yes, the goal is that they are not eating Subway or McDonald's every day. We want it to be nutritious, but we want it to also be fun and something new for them. So that is our latest program that we're doing for our members, which is really great. And then as far as this year is concerned, we had our first board retreat because of COVID. We were all Zoomed. So that felt really good. We brought in 4 new board members. We started with 2 community stakeholders who did not have any relationship with individuals with disabilities, and 4 parents. And we found that the further in the weeds we get with some of the problems, the harder it is for the parents to navigate through all of the hurdles that we're doing as a board. Again, how much bandwidth do people have? So we brought in some people who work in the special ed world, like Laura Fine, for example, who's on our board. She knows so much about the population. She's used to working with families, but she is able to have perspective because she's not in it. It's not my kid needs to have an apartment. And that gets in the way of being able to make some decisions for the organization. So that was a good learning experience for us. So we now have a balance. We have some parents and we have other people who are really cognizant of real estate, law, housing, education, transition. So that is our timeline right now. And these are some of our collaborative groups, organizations that we work with and that we'll continue to work with. And one other program I should say, there is Arts of Life just popped up. I don't know if you're all familiar with Arts of Life, but we got a grant also to have Arts of Life do a program up here at the Highland Park Arts Center for our individuals, and then also for the greater community. So part of this program is actually an inclusive art program at the Highland Park Arts Center for our family, our members, and also for people on the outside, typical people. So that's been a really great program as well, like an amazing program. Here's some of our families, some of our supporters, some of the things that, people feel about our organization, which is very nice. And here is our community. We have a lot more at this point, but these are some of our faces. This is our Facebook page. Members have a link to a private group. So we have a private group for members, and we have a page for the public. And then we also have a website, which is the cchi.org. So I welcome you all to check it out. And that is CCHI, and I bet we have a million questions. So let's see.
All right, here we go. Thank you. That was, gosh, so exciting and interesting, all the things that you're doing. All right, so do you include people who want their own apartment in a building with support available?
Do we include people who want their own apartment with support in a outside?
It says in a building with support available. So.
Well, that is the goal of our first building. It is going to be a market rate building, and it will have set asides for our population to be in. If somebody wants to be in a market rate building and just kind of plug in and get supports, we are not a service provider, and we are not going to be a service provider because there are a lot of service providers in the area, and granted, they all are having staffing issues, but we're really more focused on the building of community and the togetherness and the choice and the overall support, but not individual in that fashion.
Okay, so this leads to the next question. It says, she asked, what are your thoughts on funding of an on-site program director? Is that the same as your description of a program manager, I guess?
It is. It's pretty much the same. I think that we've gone through a few generations of what it's going to look like, and COVID has impacted what we think that position looks like more and more. The other thing is, it seems like one of the big gaps that people experience is the idea of a caseworker. Like, parents are caseworkers. We're all caseworkers for our kids. So who's going to take the place of the caseworker, right? Take out the love and affection and all of that stuff. And who's going to manage the day-to-day, right? Hopefully the service provider will do that. But as we all know, there's this other layer of parents whose kids are still live in apartments, and they're still picking their kids up and driving them and taking them to piano and doing all these things. So someone needs to fill that spot. And that's one thing that we thought this person might be able to handle, but it doesn't make sense. So the program person really needs to focus on program opportunities for inclusion in the community and building the community, where we have to figure out as a community, how do we deal with this caseworker thing? Because that's a really important piece.
Okay. Next question is, what is your ideal population? Verbal, nonverbal, ages, and ratio of level of support, 3 to 1, 5 to 1, 10 to 1.
We don't have an ideal. We have some people who need 24/7 support, who are in wheelchairs, who cannot eat by themselves or go to the bathroom by themselves. We have people who are driving and taking the train to work and living somewhat independently. So we have a wide range. I think there's, our true philosophy is there is a place for everybody. There is a place for everybody, and we want our kids included everywhere. The one thing we do say to families is, if your young adult is a high behavior person or a flight risk or a whatever, do you want to put them in a apartment building like somebody who could live more independently? Probably not. You may want to put them in more of a supportive housing, right? Where it's a smaller, a smaller environment, but that's not up to us to say. All we can do is show the parents what different things can be available and help them make those decisions. Because there is no, as we all know, we're all different. Our kids are all different. And we're not saying, okay, we're only going to take higher functioning because they could do this. Well, some level can do this, but some level could do that. And it's kind of like all of our work to figure out how do we best do that, without taking away the rights of the individual.
Excellent. Okay, next question. I love the inclusion idea. Just curious, for the neurotypical residents, are there any requirements that they participate in community programming in order to live there? Background checks for safety?
Yeah, that's good. That's a great question. Well, our first model where it was affordable, yes, we did have a criteria that was set up for who would be on the priority list for the apartment building. And you could do that with affordable housing. Okay, you can say the minus 30% AMI and under is specifically going to be for individuals with IDD or for individuals with disabilities. And the other is going to be police officers, firefighters, social workers, people in education, people working at the hospital, speech, OT, PT, all of that. That was our scenario for our first building. And you could do that if you have control over everything. If we were to buy our own building or build our own building and say, these are all market rate and these are all, for our people, could we control specifically who comes in? We could. But if we are not the owner, the developer, we can't. So you can't control 100% who is going to be there. You can't. If it's going to be a regular apartment building where we're plugging 10 units in. And that's part of the beauty of inclusion, and it's also part of the risk, right? It is what it is. And that's another thing where if we have somebody who's overseeing some of these things, right, that we want to make sure everybody lives in the safest way possible, right? We don't want to set anyone up for failure. So I think the idea of inclusion doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't, or possibly people don't know the amount of supports they're going to need if they do live in that kind of environment. And they might be better for a supportive housing environment, which again is something that is a little bit more easy to navigate.
Okay. And then thank you, Christy Wessel, for sharing some resources for people to contact. Christine Haley from the Illinois Task Force on Homelessness, as well as David Esposito from Supportive Housing Providers Association. Good for people to contact if they have questions. Okay, next question is, our son is 31. We are in Lake County. His challenges are primarily medical. Would the Highwood housing be an appropriate setting for him?
I can't say if it would be. I don't know if it would be.
How would families work with you on that too?
Well, I think that, what we talk a lot about the evolution of this particular project, but we also talk a lot about what the next projects look like. So, one of our families who originally was really wanting this inclusive environment, through the past 4 years, she literally said to me last week, I'm willing to do all this work for this building because it needs to get done and it's super important. But I know now that my son should be in a supportive environment. So I want to work on that next. And that's the way we roll. I mean, that's exactly what we're doing. It's like, okay, great. Join that committee because, we're going to work. So I would say, just get involved. We have meetings every single month. We have committee work. We have all this stuff. We have a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of parents wanting to work together to come up with solutions together. So the more we get people together, the more parents are kind of starting to talk these things through, get to know, and especially when the young adults are with us, when they're coming, they're building their own organic relationships. We're not forcing anyone together. We're just like, we're all meeting for pizza and people can hang out and do what they do, but they end up congregating or not. And there's a lot of parallel phone action going on, but that's okay.
Okay. So that sounds like people contact you, join the group, and then can start participating and see if it's a good fit and move forward as it works. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, we're in this for the long haul, and our goal is that we keep creating different models in different areas, and that, we keep working with the state and the counties at funding these things. And so the more we do that, the more we're going to get back. I mean, I hate to say this to any family, and at the end of the day, maybe I'm very no frosting on the cupcake anymore, but no one's doing this. So no one's doing it. It's a really hard thing to do. So it's a lot better if you could do it with other families that are going through the same thing.
Yeah. Then this next question actually is right along those lines. There will be many like us who want their kids to be living at a CCHI center. How do you see going about advertising to normal peers, typical peers, to be able to live in this community?
What we have found through this process is it's not really an issue for typical people to live in an apartment building next to someone with disabilities. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one is, again, you have a whole population who have gone through the system that has been inclusive. So if you already are used to that, I mean, I look at my son's friends who are typical, and it's like, would you live next door to Zach? And they're like, I would prefer to live next door to Zach over, the abusive husband that's next to me, or the drug dealer that's 3 down from me, or the guy that has guns, or, who knows who lives next door to anybody, nobody does, no one goes into a new apartment building and looks at the room and then says, I'm going to knock on everyone's door and see who's living there. It doesn't happen. So it actually happens that people who have disabilities typically are really kind. They're very good neighbors. They're very polite. They have been told their entire life that they need to behave in front of others, right? And unless they have behavior issues that are above and beyond, it is typical that our population are the best neighbors, and the neurotypical people are better for it. It is a nice environment for them to be in, and they are, I look at the Main Street Connect, and they have nurses living there, and they have all these people living there that are like, love being there because it's a truly diverse and inclusive environment, which the younger generation especially is really tuned into that, but so are multifamily at this point.
Very true. Okay, so Christy Wessel has some info to share here. Let's see if we can get Christy. Thank you so much for sharing this information. Maybe we can unmute her, Linda, if possible.
Okay.
Community,
Can you hear me?
Mark, go ahead, jump in about the CRA.
Right,
That would be awesome.
there's been a group meeting. So the Community Reinvestment Act was in place forever, where they were telling the banks, you have to reinvest money in your own community. So years ago, probably like 4 years ago, I went to one of the, I think it was an Illinois housing conference, and I walked in, and I'm used to working with all my nonprofit partners, right? And there were all these men in banks, right? Dressed to the max. We're like, what are all these people doing here? Who are they? They were bankers looking for projects to invest in. And so we were really excited about that. And they were part of the funding formula, along with IDA and a lot of projects like you're doing. And so we, under the Trump administration, unfortunately, he took away the pressure for them to put money back in the community and allowed banks to do things like advertise in sporting events and stuff, which took all this money out of our communities. Well, now there's a team of people working at getting it back to where it was and having them invest. So I'm just thinking, and I know it's a lot of work, but calling some of the bigger banks and saying, what are you doing with your community reinvestment money? Would you be willing to partner with us in a housing project? And the other thing is, as far as Christine Haley goes, so the governor passed his budget and included a line item so far. It looks like she's that position to be the chief officer in a council to end homelessness in the state of Illinois is going to continue through multiple, like if unfortunately, if a Democrat lost and a Republican took over the governor's house, that position will still be there. And I keep speaking up for you all, the disability community, but I think we need more voices speaking up for you, because you're part of the, needs assessment. They just did a very thorough needs assessment, and the state is now currently short 6,200 supportive housing units. So, right, it's shocking. And so we really need to do what you're doing on a larger scale. There's not a whole lot of full circles out there, but we are, there's about 5 nonprofit developers I know. They get frustrated because, as you're experiencing, the municipalities will often squash their projects after they've spent money on the plans and traffic studies and parking and green initiatives. And then the community comes out and says, no, I want a dog park there, and it gets squashed. So I love the work you're doing. I am blown away at what a good job you've done.
Oh, thank you. We have a really great community. We have amazing families in our community who are constantly looking at solutions, and the community investment is huge. it's huge. And I think that, you look at our developers and how limited they are, and nobody is saying we want to put a development in the middle of Highland Park or Highwood or Northbrook. No one is saying that because you don't have the community support. The very nature of what we do is you build the relationships first. You can't put up a building before you have the relationships. And I think you're totally right, Christy. It's like no developer wants to spend time with you if they're the ones going to the city council meetings and they're trying to push it through, because it's not going to happen. It's not only is there NIMBYism,
right,
but it's just, you're just completely unwelcome because people don't know who you are.
right. And there's one more bill that is moved on. So hopefully that it will pass. And that was for increasing the state's low income tax credits. So that will help to entice some developers. The federal low income tax credits are there, but a lot of people felt like the states weren't at the level that they need to attract developers. So that did move on just this week. And so hopefully that will pass as well, which will be helpful as well. Yeah. And Biden's plan had a ton of housing growth at every level in it. So we were really happy to see that as well. So things are looking up. I know it's horrible, but they are looking up.
They are looking up, but it takes a lot of, it takes the community. It takes the community to do it. And,
yeah, that's why I'm really impressed with how far you've gotten.
And we have an amazing community. I mean, I see Debbie DePalma on this call. I mean, Debbie sends me something at least once a month of something that she's gotten or seen or something, to give us the information for me and for the group. And I think like, that's what's so amazing. That is just what's so amazing is when people work together, it really does make a difference. And thankfully the communities know who we are, for good or bad. They know who we are. And so I think that is helping us get through the door now.
So, since relationships are essential, how do you draw, build those relationships with, I'm going to say, typical community members? And leading off of the question that one parent asked, Aparna asked again, which is, how do you get normal, typical peers involved to live there? What is that relationship model? You guys must have a recipe.
There is no recipe. Number one, it doesn't take encouragement for people to move into a building where people with disabilities live. That doesn't exist. So that's not the challenge that we are seeing through this process. The challenge we're seeing through this process is people not identifying our children as contributors to society. They are not seeing them as people, as individuals, and they're not seeing their families as families. So it is being out in the community. Like literally, we volunteer at the food bank. We go to the city hall meetings. We go to the community events. We sponsor, we put a booth up at some of the food truck nights. I mean, we do all these things. And we also stay affiliated with the colleges, right? And that's super important. During COVID, that totally shut down. But before COVID, we were engaged with Best Buddies. We were engaged with Trinity College. And all of those things need to get built back up now that people are coming more into in person. But the more things that we can just do and be at, next month we have a pizza thing, we're going to be at Barnaby's hanging around and having pizza, whatever. And the following month it's going to be at a park and wherever. It's just all these things that people just seeing us walking around with CCHI t-shirts or sweatshirts and being like, okay, we know who they are. And that's just what you have to do. You just have to be out there.
And are you inviting typical community members to these events also? So is that get published like either in the Park District or the Village newsletter? This is an upcoming event. Is that how you do it?
We insert ourselves in community events. So the community event is happening and we insert ourselves into it. So for example, in Highwood, every Wednesday night during the summers, they have their Wednesday market and it's turned into this Wednesday party, right? They have bands, they have all these food trucks, they have families there. It's just like this great community event. So that's one of our meetup spots. The Highland Park food trucks, that's every Thursday. Same thing. We have a booth there sometimes. We have our people out there, you know, they're wearing their CCHI stuff. And it's like, we are inserting into those events, right? And we're doing events for our own families out in the community to build relationships and get to know one another. So that gets them connected to business owners, that gets them connected to consumers, whoever is doing it. But it's just a very organic process over time.
Mhm, mhm. I can't help but envision your events being listed in the township newsletter for anyone. We're going to be at CCHI. People are going to be at the food trucks on Thursday night. If you stop by, come hang out with us, pick up a free bag of pretzels. I don't know,
Right.
something like that to start to draw people in, because if you can at least get each person from the community to say hello, acknowledge our loved ones and us in the community, that is the first step, right? So to be parallel is great, but then just have a small interaction, that's even better.
Absolutely.
If you can keep building on those opportunities, that's what I think you guys could just hit it out of the park.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the big impact will be breaking ground for our first building. That will be that will kind of be the big thing, especially if we have a space then in which we can host certain things, because that will be really impactful.
And we all want to be there for the breaking ground for sure. Big celebration.
Big celebration. Yeah, right. Indeed.
Great. Okay, I think we've covered all the questions. Is there anything else that we didn't ask you that you thought of that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I encourage you all to get involved, and I will welcome anyone to our next event. Look on our Facebook page. It's the cchi.org, and check out our website. And I think that the really lovely thing is just taking a step and meeting other people and, dipping your toe in the water, so to speak.
And I do want to jump in. I see Joelle Brescia here. She is the founding parent of Project Alex, which is working on a very similar, if not same vision with you guys. So, great minds think alike.
Yeah, I'm on their newsletter. We have talked over the years, and I mean, exactly. It's, what they're doing is lovely. I think that if I'm not mistaken, they are possibly working with Full Circle now, which is wonderful. And Full Circle is just really lovely. So.
A parent just asked in what way is are you connected with the with Schaumburg, someone in Schaumburg?
Oh, they're members. They're CCHI members. I mean, we have had people come from, I want to say as far as probably Oak Brook area. Yeah. Because in Hinsdale, we have we have people who it's like, okay, when you're ready to start building, some momentum, that's when you start bringing families in and you start kind of strategizing. How do you want it to look in your community?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for all of us, no matter where we live, to participate in the work that you're all doing, whether we're just learning so we can duplicate it, either way, to be together with other people out in the community on these very important goals that we have as we all age is absolutely wonderful. And I do want to give a shout out to Christy Wessel, who is executive staff for Representative Michelle Mussman in Schaumburg area. So Christy is just a wealth of information, and what an asset she is, and with Michelle for all the connections and all that they're doing for our community, especially our loved ones with disabilities. So thank you.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
All righty. I think Linda, I'm going to hand it off for you. Oh, we're good to go. Okay, everyone. Oh, we got lots of thank yous. Everyone appreciating it. This was
Thank you.
awesome. Thank you all very, very, very much. And we'll see you soon.
Okay, sounds good. Everyone
right,
stay
take
safe.
care.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.